Okay guys, let's go ahead and start just by practicing more triangle stuff today. Okay? Woo. Okay, so for our first problem, it says, given our tangent of theta is equal to negative 5/4, and then it also tells us that our cosine of theta is greater than 0. Okay, so what this cosine of theta is greater than 0, that's going to help us figure out what quadrant we're in, so what answer should be positive and negative, okay? So, I'm going to start by kind of drawing a triangle, okay? So it says my tangent of theta is equal to 5/4. Negative. Thank you. Negative 5/4. Okay? And then it says my cosine of theta is greater than 0. So that means it's going to be positive. Okay? So it says I need to find my sine and my secant. Okay, so if I first think about this, like where my all students take calculus, like what's going to be positive in every quadrant. So I know if my cosine is greater than 0, that means it's going to be positive. So I need to be in one of the quadrants where cosine is positive, okay? So I'm either going to be in quadrant 1 or quadrant 4, okay? Because my cosine has to be positive, okay? But then, because my tangent value is negative, I know I'm going to be down here in quadrant 4, okay? Because here, everything is positive, all things are positive. So right away, I know that I'm in quadrant 4, okay? So that's my first step, and that'll actually help me with drawing my triangle, because if I draw like a triangle like this, and use my angle at the origin, then I can get everything set up correctly, okay? So my triangle from the 4th quadrant will look like this, and I always use my angle at my origin, okay? So then it says my tangent, which I know that tangent is gonna be opposite over adjacent. Okay, so remember like sine, opposite over hypotenuse, ka, toa. Okay, so if you like need to sound those out for your quiz, like so, ka, toa, to help you remember what goes with what. Okay, so toa, so tangent, opposite over adjacent. Okay. What, Jonathan? You said that doesn't make sense.
I'm fine. We're just struggling
Yeah,
with sine.
How can you have a negative if you're slow that?
Okay, so my negative, okay, so if we think my tangent is my opposite over my adjacent, so my opposite side is gonna be negative 5, and then my adjacent side would be 4, which that makes sense because if you think about like your x and y axis, this is positive, but going down, we're going down into the negatives. So it makes sense that this number is negative and that number is positive, okay? Because the way it's written right now, this negative, you don't know if it goes to the negative, to the 5 or the 4. So that's why we have to use the quadrants to figure out which number is actually negative. Because we know it's just gonna be one of them, because it could have been negative 4, but we know that this, we're going in the positive x direction, so it's going to be the positive, but we're going down on our y, so that would be the negative 1. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so then once we have our triangle, we can go ahead and use the Pythagorean theorem to find our other side, and then we can just use the triangle to find the sine and the secant to answer my questions. Okay, so if I do my Pythagorean theorem, I know that that's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So Alyssa, what do you think my a and b are gonna be?
4 squared plus negative 5 squared.
Yeah. Okay, so then 4 squared gives me
16.
okay, and negative 5 squared gives me
25.
okay, and 16 plus 25 gives me
32, 31, I don't know.
41.
41, 25, 35, yeah, 41. Okay, is equal to c squared, and then c would be?
I don't know. The
Just
square
for-
root of 41.
Yes, so c is just gonna be the square root of 41. Okay, so I know that this side length right here is gonna be the square root of 41. Okay, and it did come out, it's positive, I don't need to worry about my signs or anything, so this is the square root of 41. Okay, so then to answer my question, I need to find the sine of theta. So looking at my theta angle, how do I find out what sine is, Alex? What side lengths do I use?
Your opposite hypotenuse.
Okay, so that would be what?
-5 and square root of 41.
Okay, can I leave square roots in the denominator?
No,
What would I do?
multiply.
Okay, so if I multiply by square root of 41 over square root of 41, what do I end up with, Alex?
-5 times square root of negative, or square root of 41 over 41.
Yep, exactly. Yep, so I just looked at my angle, and I know that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. And then I just can't leave my square roots in my denominator, so I multiply by square root of 41 over square root of 41. And I should have -5 square root of 41 over 41. Okay, and then just to double check my, make sure it's really negative, I'm in this quadrant down here, and the only thing that's positive is cosine, and what's cosine paired with? Secant. Yep, so only cosine and secant are positive. So my sine being negative, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, yep. So they should always work out. So just kind of checking that, like this is a way to check and make sure you kept track of your negatives. Jasmine?
So you said only cosine and secant are positive in that quadrant.
Yep.
Does that mean everything else has to be negative, or
Yes.
just those have to be positive?
Just these are the only ones that can be positive, so then everything else has to be negative. Yep, so,
Almost confusing because cosecant and whatever cosine both have C and then it's like
Right.
psych.
so it's like the C's can't go together.
And yeah, that's true.
Yep,
Just,
so,
well, if you think about it, like, you know how it's like the reciprocal, cosine and secant are the reciprocal, because the S is on the front, on the secant, and the S is on the front
oh,
on the
you like flip it?
cosine. That's how I remember it.
Yeah, that makes sense, so. Yeah, so you just think about like which ones are in your calculator, like sine, cosine, tangent. Obviously, none of those can be the reciprocals because they're all their own. So if that helps you, like remember like sine and cosine can't go together, okay? And then, as Jasmine said, you can flip it or just remember like S's and C's get paired together because you can't have S and S and C and C. Okay?
So then I'm gone.
All right, so then the other one, so secant of theta, if I'm trying to solve for that,
What a depressing answer.
so secant, in terms of my triangle, what side lengths do I need, Brady?
Your adjacent and your hypotenuse will be adjacent.
Yep, that'll be hypotenuse over my adjacent. Yep, because secant and cosine go together, so they're the same sides, but cosine, so like ca, like C-A-H, so adjacent over hypotenuse, but we flip that, so it's hypotenuse over adjacent. So then Brady, what would it be?
The square root of 41 over 4.
Okay. Cool, yeah, so we end up with the square root of 41 over 4. We have it being positive. Should it be positive?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's in this quadrant right here. Okay? So yeah, so this is just like all the triangle stuff all together. How do you guys feel on the first example?
That was amazing.
Unique.
It was amazing?
Best in the
We
world.
reviewing? Do we review for quizzes?
No, we don't.
So
So it's quiz, yeah. So Tuesday's your quiz, so we'll do notes today and y'all have work time Monday and then Tuesday's your quiz, okay? All right, let's try another one. So this time we're starting with our secant of theta being 5/3, which is gonna help us to draw our triangle. In the quadrant, it says that our angle is between 0 and 90 degrees. So automatically, if I'm between 0 and 90 degrees, that puts me in the first quadrant. Okay, so everything's gonna be positive there. Okay, so that tells me if I'm in my first quadrant, kind of how I should draw my triangle. Okay, so if I'm in my first quadrant, I can draw my triangle this way with my angle at the origin. Okay, so I draw my triangle and then my angle is always at the origin. Okay, so then I have secant of theta is equal to 5/3. So where should I put that? What side should my 5 go on, Madison?
Your
My adjacent side?
No,
Hypo-
your hypotenuse side.
Okay, put it on. My hypotenuse.
3 should be your adjacent side.
Yep, and 3 would be my adjacent, because I know that secant is equal to hypotenuse over adjacent. Okay, so here's what I have. So now I need to go ahead and figure out this other side length. So if I use my Pythagorean theorem, I have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Grant, what would I put in?
You'd have 3 squared for, so 9,
Okay,
plus b squared equals 25.
okay.
Subtract 9, 16. Squared, b equals 4.
Yep. So this is a special triangle, so if you ever see like a 3, 4, 5 triangle, you can just remember, if your hypotenuse is 5, like it's not like a side length, it's not a leg, 3, 4, 5 is always one of the triangles, okay? So if you have one side that's 3 and you have a hypotenuse that's 5, your other side is always gonna be 4 without having to work it out. So it's like a special triangle. So a 3, 4, 5 triangle, okay? So if you remember that, if not, you can always solve it, so 3, 4, 5 triangle. Okay, so we have our sides and everything. So now the question, I need to figure out cosine and tangent. So my cosine of theta, looking at my triangle, Blake, what would I have?
3 over 5.
Yeah, 3 over 5. Do you guys think I could have figured that out without having to draw this triangle?
Yeah, it's the opposite.
Yeah, I could have just flipped this, right? But because I needed my tangent, I did need the rest of the triangle, okay? So, my tangent, Madison, what do I think for my tangent?
Sine over cosine, so.
Do I have my sign right now?
No.
Okay,
Is it not?
Oh, so it's opposite over adjacent.
okay.
So it'd be 4 over 3.
Yeah, 4 over 3. Yep, opposite over adjacent, so 4 over 3. Okay? And both of those are positive. Does that make sense? Because I'm in the first quadrant, everything should be positive?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay? Okay. Okay, so we've seen this before, our reference angles, but we can use those to help us with like drawing triangles and stuff. So you saw this back when you guys were at home learning for the week. But so just a review, so reference angles are always your angle that takes you back to your x-axis. So depending on what quadrant you're in, you just go to your closest x-axis. So you either continue with your angle or you go backwards. And the formulas to figure out what your reference angle is, in quadrant 1, it's just what your angle is. Whatever the angle is also the reference angle. In quadrant 2, you take 180 degrees and you subtract your angle. So, because 180 degrees is here, if I were to subtract out this angle, that would leave me with just my reference angle, okay? And remember, we could also be using pi instead of 180 degrees, so it just depends on if you start in radians or if you start in degrees, which one. Quadrant 3, if you take your angle, so if I went all the way to here, here's my angle, and then I were to subtract out 180 degrees, this part right here, I'm left with just what my reference angle would be. Okay, so this one, you take your angle minus the 180 degrees. And then the last quadrant, you take the 360, so one full time around the circle, and then you subtract out your angle, and that would give you your reference angle. Okay, so these are gonna help us with figuring out stuff. So just a review on reference angles. Question?
No.
No?
It's just a, I wonder if we were involved or we might keep
Cucumber?
go over.
Alright, so let's go ahead, let's find some reference angles, just for some practice. So if I have my theta is equal to 300 degrees. So we have theta equals 300 degrees. What quadrant do I think that's gonna be in? Yeah, that's gonna be in the fourth quadrant, because that would be, if I start here, it's positive, so I'm going around this way. 270's here, so it's probably like right here. That was 300 degrees. So if I'm in the fourth quadrant, what's my equation for how to figure out my reference angle?
360 minus x.
Yeah, 360 minus my angle. So then what would that give me?
60.
60, yep. So my reference angle is 60 degrees. That would be from here to get back to my x-axis. It took me 60 degrees. All right, the next one, it says 2.3. Doesn't say degrees, doesn't say radians,
Does it ever?
I
say
say it's no
radians?
solution.
just a number. So what are you guys thinking for this? So 2.3.
Is it that X, Y thing, so like these things?
Is it
Neither sine nor cosine.
is it a side, in a triangle?
It's not a side on a triangle.
It's not a length.
Let's think about just like our numbers. So we know that like here to here is pi,
What's the
right?
coordinate?
It's a point.
There you go.
Kind of. What's pi equal to?
3.14.
3.14 in terms of just a number, okay? So that's not a radian and it's not a degree. It's just what pi is equal to. It's just the number, right? So up here, we know that this is pi over 2, right? What's pi over 2 equal to?
3.14 divided by 2.
Which is
1.5,
like 1.57, I think.
1.57 something.
Whoa, what are we doing?
We're just figuring out kind of where our numbers are.
Wait, where did you get 1.57?
That's,
Pi
Because
of
we know that
3.14.
this is pi over 2 up here,
Okay.
which
so
in
you're
terms
just-
of a
yeah.
number is
Sorry.
1.57.
I-
So this angle, the 2.3, what quadrant do I think that's gonna be in? 2. It's gonna be somewhere in between 1.57 and 3.14. Probably closer to this one, so something like this. So from here to here, I went a distance of 2.3. Wasn't a degree, wasn't a radian, it's just a number, but we can figure out numbers too. Okay, so then if I'm in quadrant 2, what's my reference angle formula?
would be 3.14 minus x.
You said it was what, Grant?
It'd be 3.14 minus x.
Yeah, 3.14 minus my 2.3. Because usually the formula was like 180 degrees minus my angle, or pi minus my angle. Well, we know that pi is 3.14, so if I take 3.14 minus 2.3, someone types that in, what do we get?
8 or 0.76.
Like 0.84?
Same thing.
Yeah, so for this one, my reference angle, so to get from here to my x-axis, I have to go 0.84 more. Okay, so that one, a little tricky. You won't have a lot like that, but you can do it with just numbers, because we can logically think about like where this number would be on my unit circle. That's it.
So then with like the 3 pi over 2, you just multiply 3.14 by 3 and then divide by 2? If
Yeah.
it's the right number?
Yep, if we needed it down here. Yep, we could do that.
Okay.
Yep,
I just wanted to compliment you on your circle. It looks very nice.
Did you say?
this one?
Yeah.
So like
Okay.
if it goes into like the third quadrant, then you have 3.14 and you have to figure out what the number is for 3 pi over 2, you just multiply
That looks
3 by
nice. Mine is just a
3.14 divided by
circle.
2.
I just feel like.
But really, if we're in the third quadrant, we would take the angle minus the 180, so, but if you did need to know that, that's how you would figure it out. Okay, all right, let's do the last one.
Let's go.
All right, so this last one, I have negative 135 degrees. What does the negative mean?
Going backwards.
I'm going backwards. What quadrant, where do I think that I should draw this?
The third.
Third.
Like a third, like right here?
No. Yes.
Kind of
Oh,
is.
it's 180 no matter what. It's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, because this would be 180, this is 90, so it's in between 90 and 180. So we'll say this is 135 degrees. Okay, so I need to figure out my reference angle to get back to my x-axis. So if I'm in quadrant 3, what's my formula?
180 minus that
It'll be plus,
plus.
cause it'd be 180, well, it'd be negative 130.
Nothing's plus on here.
Let's see.
That's how you get back. You'd have to add 180.
I'm not seeing a plus sign for
Could we take, what do you have written down for your quadrant 3?
x minus 180.
Yeah, x minus 180. Because you take your angle minus 180.
So we'd have,
Okay, so then, if I were to plug in negative 135 minus 180, what do I get?
315.
Does that make any sense, guys?
No.
So in order for these formulas to work, I need to know the positive direction, okay? So in order for my formula to work, I need to know what this is in terms of my positive number, okay? So if this is negative 135, what would the angle be if I went in the positive direction?
You always need to know the
225.
positive.
225. Yep, so you always have to use the positive angle. You always need to go in the positive direction. Okay, so this angle is 225 degrees or negative 135. Those are the same angle. Those are coterminal angles, okay? So now that I know that, I can actually go ahead and plug in that positive number into my formula. Okay,
45.
45, yeah. So then I end up with 45 degrees. So my reference angle to get me back to the x-axis would be 45 degrees.
so your
Okay.
reference angle can never be negative?
Right, your reference angle will never be negative. Yep, so and always figure out what your positive one is. So if it gives you a negative, we know that we can just add or subtract 360 to it depending on what we have, in order to figure out going in the opposite direction, okay? All right,
Got all for notes?
not even.
Not even close.
Not even. Okay, so some of these, now let's go ahead, using our reference angles, we're gonna go ahead and find cosine, sine, those kind of values, okay? Okay, so for this first one, I have the cosine of 4 pi over 3. Where do I think that 4 pi over 3 is on my circle?
Third quadrant.
Third quadrant? I went like this far and then like a little extra, like right here. 4 pi over 3. Okay, so what do you think that my reference angle is to get back to the x-axis?
Pi over. No,
Are we going for radians or degrees?
does that be 2?
We'll keep it in radians.
1 pi over 3?
Yeah, but it'll be 1 pi over 3. And the way that we figure that out is we know that whatever number is in our denominator, that's how many I go when I'm doing half of my circle. So from here to here, I went 3 pi over 3. Because 3 pi over 3 would be the same thing as pi. So from here to here, I went 3, and then I had to go 1 more to get me to 4. So in order to go back to my x-axis where I was at 3 pi over 3, because right here is 3 pi over 3, which is equal to pi, I know I need to go back just 1 pi over 3. Okay, so my reference angle is gonna be pi over 3. Okay, so then my cosine at pi over 3, if we think about fingers and stuff, usually pi over 3 over here is this is pi over 3. So what finger is that I put down? Yeah, it's my second one. Okay, cosine, is that fingers on my left or fingers on my right? Left. So what do I think?
Square root of 1 over 2, which is 1/2.
Yep, it's gonna be square root of 1 over 2, because square root of fingers over 2, so it's just gonna be 1/2. Okay? And I'm trying to make you guys remember how to do this, because remember, you don't get your unit circle on this very first quiz. Okay? So I'm trying to remind you all the tricks for how you guys can figure this out. Okay? So the only thing though, guys, if it's cosine and it's in this quadrant right here, if I think about my all students take calculus,
Oh, it's directly.
should my cosine in this quadrant right here be positive?
No.
No, so I know it's gonna be negative. Okay, So, and if you were looking at your unit circle, because you guys have already filled in all these values, your cosine at 4 pi over 3, you should all have written that it's negative 1/2. But remember guys, you're not gonna get this on the first quiz, so that's why we just did it the long way.
I hate asking questions, but, what's the negative about? How did you get that?
Because my angle, the 4 pi over 3 is here in my third quadrant,
Oh,
and only tangent and cotangent are positive there, so if I'm doing cosine, I know it has to be negative.
okay, thank you.
Yep, that's where I got that. Anyone else questions on that first one? Okay, let's go ahead and do another one. Okay, so this one, I'm trying to figure out my tangent at negative 210 degrees. So first of all, I need to figure out where this angle is. So if it's negative, what does that mean?
Backwards.
Yeah, we go backwards. And negative, so 210, where do I think that possibly might be? Let's see, because this would be 180, so like a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is gonna be negative 210 degrees. If I were to go this way, to find my coterminal angle, what do I think that would be? Yeah, 150. Yep, because I can just take 360 minus my 210, because I take one circle, subtract out this part, that leaves me with the other part of the circle. Okay, so yeah, so 150. So then if I have the positive one, I can go ahead and figure out what my reference angle is using my rules, or I can just think to get back to my x-axis, how many would I go? Yeah, 30, because if this is 150 and this is 180, so to get from here to here, I need 30 more. So my reference angle is gonna be 30 degrees. Okay, so really I'm actually gonna be finding my tangent of 30 degrees. So now 30 degrees, what finger is that? My ring finger. Okay, so how do I figure out tangent? Yeah, sine over cosine, because I don't have a triangle right now. So I can't do opposite over adjacent. So sine over cosine. So what's my sine at 30 degrees? 1/2, yep, because it's gonna be the fingers on the left, so it's gonna be 1/2. And then what's my cosine at 30 degrees? Yeah, square root of 3 over 2. Good, we're starting to remember those numbers. See, you guys are like, we're getting it. Okay, so now, if I have this right here, how do I get it out of this mixed fraction?
Multiply by the reciprocal.
Yeah, I want to multiply by my reciprocal, so I'll have 1/2 times 2 over the square root of 3. Which, what can happen now?
But you can, cancel.
It's just 1/2, isn't it?
My 2's will cancel each other, right?
Oh, it's, isn't the answer square root?
Oh, multiply by reciprocal.
So if you have one
Yep, and then I'll have to multiply by the square root of 3 over 3 that I heard you guys saying. So that's gonna give me what?
Square root of 3.
Yep, square root of 3 over 3. Okay, so that's my tangent value at 30 degrees. Did I start with 30 degrees though?
No.
I'm actually looking at this angle right here. So if it's in quadrant 2, what's positive in quadrant 2? Yeah, sine and cosecant. Should tangent be positive then? No, so I'm gonna have to put a negative. Okay, so my answer would be negative square root of 3 over 3.
So, the negative square root of 3 over 3, that's just stuff they, you know, do that off like a circle thing.
No, yep, you don't carry your tangents on your circle. Yep, you just have sine and cosine. Okay, all right guys, the last one before the bell rings, we'll have cosecant of 11 pi over 4.
Isn't that just 4 over 11 pi for
For what?
sine?
Yeah, for sine it would be 4 over 11 pi. But do I need that?
No.
I don't need that. I need to figure out my cosecant value of this. So, in terms of where it would be on my circle, it's positive, so I'm gonna go in this positive direction. And then remember, whatever number's in your denominator, that's how many half your circle goes. So from here to here, I go 4, 8, this would be 12, so I'm close. But so this is gonna be 11 pi over 4.
And your reference is 1 pi over 4.
Yep, so then my reference to get me to my x-axis would be 1 pi over 4. Jasmine,
What are we trying to solve?
we're trying to find where the angle is first, and then we need to figure out the cosecant there.
Pi over 4.
But it's giving, isn't that the cosecant, or is it the cosecant of 11 pi over 4?
Cosecant of 11 pi over 4. Yep, just like how it was
Is it?
tangent of negative 210 degrees. This is my radian value, it's not a tangent value. Okay, so this is like a radian, an angle.
6 is
Okay.
green, 4 is.
So you guys said that my reference angle, so if I went around, so I went 4, 8, if I went all the way to my x-axis, it would be 12, but I have to stop just short of my x-axis. So my reference angle is gonna be pi over 4, okay? So, pi over 4 is actually what I'm gonna be using. So then pi over 4, what finger is that? Middle finger, sorry. I don't know. Cosecant, what does cosecant go with, guys?
Sine.
Sine, so let's find our sine at pi over 4, and then we can flip it to get our cosecant at pi over 4.
Square root of 2 over 2.
So yeah, so Shannon just said our sine at pi over 4 is square root of 2 over 2. So if I flip that to get my cosecant, what would it be?
2 square root of 2.
Yep, 2 over square root of 2. Can I leave it like that?
Isn't it just 1?
So if I multiply by square root of 2 over 2, or square root of 2 over square root of 2, then I'd have 2 square root of 2 over 2.
It'd just be square root of 2.
Yep, which is just gonna be the square root of 2. Okay?
Okay, here, is it cosine that goes up, or is it cosine that goes down?
Cosine are the fingers on the left, because if you think, so it's like cosine is your x and sine is your y. So if you, like cosine's on the left side, also they go in alphabetical order. So cosine, like C comes before S. So yeah, so the left side is your cosine.
So like if we were to do this, this is good, this is.
Yep, exactly. Okay guys, we'll stop there today.